Hey there, welcome to episode 137 of the Cafe Genius Impresario's audio program. I am your host, Dan Hugo. We are recording this at 3:28 in the morning, 3:28 a.m. Pacific Time on Friday, October 10, 2025. We normally publish this episode or episodes of this program on Fridays, so we're a little ahead of schedule, which is a nice change of pace. Friday, another Friday already. Today's title and topic, City as a System, kind of goes in with the City as a Showcase episode a few back. If you are not familiar with the Cafe Genius Impresario's audio program or Cafe Genius in general, let me see, where shall I begin? Cafe Genius was formed in January of 2022. It was a wrapper of sorts around a few different ideas and projects and so on. The Pitch Workout Room is probably the one more people would be familiar with. Our Genius Roundtable, an entrepreneur look at how our entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem is functioning or not functioning, and some ideas about what we can start doing about it. The Pitch Mingle was another one. There's a rolling introspection endeavor on the table. There's a Downtown Project retrospective to look back in time at what worked, what didn't, and what they did about it, and how we can apply that to the current footprint on which the global innovation hub may be here in the greater Vegas area. So that's a taste. That's Cafe Genius, named for two things: Cafe Centro, a coffee shop in San Francisco in the South Park area across the street from the ballpark. At one point, the AT&T ballpark, now the Oracle ballpark. I think was it the Pac Bell ballpark before that? I think so. Cafe Centro with two F's was where startups start. It was kind of a little good luck charm for some of the startups in the San Francisco Bay Area, an area known for startups. Cafe with two F's, the only real way to spell that. Genius for the Genius lunches we used to have on occasion in the Downtown Project area. I myself was never a part of the Downtown Project directly, a friend of the project, an external spectator, but the Genius lunches were ad hoc gatherings to go over some gossip or who's doing what, what's up, what's down, etc., etc. Cafe Genius, an homage of sorts. Unfortunately, Cafe Centro is no longer in business. Post-pandemic, I guess they didn't really make it. It was sometime after everything kind of reopened. But anyway, no Cafe Centro. We do need a Cafe Centro or 10 in the greater Vegas entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem. It is where startups start, and that still may be true, where ideas start. How about that? And the show, Cafe Genius Impresario spelled with two S's, which is not a common, but is not an incorrect spelling. Those are the people that are making stuff happen. If we don't have impresarios as guests, we can still speak about things that impact them. After all, I am an impresario. You probably are also. Hopefully, wherever you found this audio program, you're able to locate the episode description, which contains the show notes, including a summary of 2 sentences, which I will read to you, and the links for today's episode, 2 shameless self-promotion links, and 2 episode links. Not too bad. You should be able to locate this episode in more places than about 2 months ago. We are now on YouTube as a YouTube podcast. We're now on Apple Podcasts. We're on Amazon Podcasts. There's an RSS feed, of course. There's a homepage. We'll get to that in a second. So let's get started so we can get finished before the sun rises. The show notes for today's episode: a summary, a region, a city perhaps, which is moving forward toward diversification is more likely to be successful doing so if it can maintain coherence. What does that mean, and why should this sound familiar? The links for today's episode include a link to our homepage, cafegenius.org. That's CAFEGENIUS, no space, genius, cafegenius.org. There you will find a link to the current episode of the audio program, which shortly will be this one. But in the future, it will not be. Still working on that site. I've probably talked about this too much, that making it look nice and with more functionality has been on my to-do list, but I wear a lot of hats. But there is a homepage. As long as the link is getting out there, Hopefully I will disappoint very few people while it is a work in progress. But then what isn't a work in progress? The profile page linking everything, that is my buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo profile page. That has been around for 5 years. I never ask people to spend money there. You do not need to spend money there, but if you want to, you can. That's fine. It is a free-form profile page that I don't have to maintain. It also doesn't look great, but it looks better than the cafegenius.org homepage as of today. It's a matter of taste. Functionality, though. The buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo profile page has links to all of my audio programming, including the newer YouTube channel links. So @ Cafe Genius to get to the YouTube channel for this program. Also the Spotify for Creators profile pages for each of them. That's kind of the starting point where RSS feeds are generated and files are stored and so on and so on. And from there you can find the other places, or you can subscribe to an RSS feed directly if you so choose. buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo. And don't forget, the Buy Me an Update audio program is published on Monday mornings at buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo/posts. And there's also a YouTube channel and a Spotify for Creators and RSS feed and all that stuff. And Coffee Solo is still being published, so you can check that out as well. It's all right there on the buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo profile page. Now, why some cities thrive while others struggle. New study reveals the secret rule driving U.S. city growth and decline. That's a scitechdaily.com article that I just came across. And I said, oh, this totally aligns with what I've been talking about for, 136 episodes of this audio program. I should talk about this in that context. Now, I will say it right up front. This article is about a study that was published. It is available for $20. There's a link at the bottom of the article that I have linked here to that study. I am not associated with an institution and whatnot, so I have to pay $20 for this. I have not done that yet. I just came across this. As I will talk about, it will integrate into some other papers and things that are that I'm assembling to kind of create the underpinnings of a picture of our ecosystem forward, our entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem, which is the study topic for the Cafe Genius undertaking. So I just want to say that up front. I'm discussing an article about a study. In the future, we will talk about the actual study in the context of some other studies that I've talked about previously and some other stuff, but we'll get there. I'm getting ahead of myself. And a link, which I've linked to before, to the LVGEA, that's Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance.org, lvgea.org, the key industry page, which mentions, I can't speak. It's only 3:37 in the morning now. Mentions the key industries in the Vegas area, industries that thrive in Las Vegas. So are they coherent? That's the question. Now, let's get started so we can get finished. Another broken record. I'm sorry. I'll apologize in advance. I came upon this article only a few days ago, and I knew immediately that this was a road we have traveled many times over the course of this audio program's many episodes. Why not add this to the mix? So full disclosure, I did not yet purchase the actual report, as I said, for $20 to integrate into my own pursuits here in the greater Vegas area and beyond. This probably applies to other places. Certainly the study does. They studied a lot of cities in the United States over the past 170 years, apparently. For the moment, I'm introducing the confluence that appears to exist between the findings described and the idea in the article, and by extension in the study, and the ideas already presented here over the past 136 episodes of the Cafe Genius Impresarios audio program. I have discussed 2 study reports regarding the ecosystem of the Southern Nevada region as it pertains to entrepreneurialism or a startup scene, perhaps an innovation hub, global even. Yeah, well, we don't have to go all the way there. A more in-depth look at the findings in these two reports. One was published as recently as the summer. I think it was June of 2025, which I did an entire episode about. But it was of a smaller scope, more Southern Nevada. And the other, a statewide study that also focused on Washoe County, Clark County, and then rural Nevada, the rest of the state. The economic ecosystems of those, that was published 2023, I think it was. And that was very early in the life of this audio program. So we actually had a conversation with the person that published that study, Mo Collins. And she was paid by EDON. That's the LVGEA equivalent in Washoe County. I think the LVGEA also contributed to that study. And I was mentioned in that study. A little plug for me. So it's over 2 years old. So that's worth a look. Again, it may be a refresh. These coherence findings concerning city growth and decline, other studies along the lines of ecosystem development, better termed emergence, in my view. I don't know if you can really build an ecosystem. It kind of comes from providing the necessary ingredients in abundance and with few restrictions. And innovation culture, cultivation. That is a culture of innovation being cultivated. That might disprove my own assertion regarding, well, coherence among the various non-tech and tech-adjacent components that come in behind the fun economy and healthcare, arguably the two most lucrative elements of our diverse economy today. So let me fix that little typo. They come in, that is on a list of important things. The two big ones, the gaming economy, or the fun economy, which includes gaming, and healthcare, which I think might be 25%, but the fun economy is a huge chunk, but it's not 100%. I think some people might believe that it is. Certainly, if you've looked at the news for the summer and the angst and some local content creators and some national news outlets are panicking. The future, as indicated by Las Vegas, is grim, always an early predictor of the future of our economy, of a coming recession because of a reduction in tourism by as much as 10% for a particular month compared to a year ago. Some misleading headlines that suggest that it's been declining month over month by comparing this month to the previous month. But the numbers provided are this month compared to last year, same month. It's a small detail, but tourism and visitors versus gaming revenues, these diverge a little bit. So there's a little bit more to the story. But here's the big take home from that. The fun economy still rules. It may not be 100% of our economy, but it's 100% of the attention economy. It gets the attention. It gets a response. A 5-day discount spree. And from what I understand, there was a lot of traffic to the website, which is the early measurement of a potential success. So yes, that is where the attention goes, the fun economy. Let's make sure that doesn't go away. And that's the topic of today's episode. Healthcare, arguably the two most, healthcare and fun economy, most lucrative elements of our diverse economy today. And this is not to mention manufacturing, clean tech, and water conservation, among others. And we'll talk about those. Let's talk about it right now. The reason I provided the link to which I have open. Wait, where do I have it open? I have it open. Do I not have it open? Oh, that's right. Yeah, of course I do. Okay, I was literally just looking at it. So the LVGEA link, Industries That Thrive in Las Vegas. Let's run through them very quickly. Advanced manufacturing and battery. So battery technology, there is a battery manufacturing site in Henderson, and I know that battery technology has been a big thing since let me see if I can remember it, the McDougal caldera, lithium mine, Northern Nevada. It's McSomething. Wait, are they calling it the Thacker Pass? Caldera. Sorry to interrupt the flow of the show here, but I like to try to get these things correct. McDermott caldera. It's the Thacker Pass lithium mine at the McDermott caldera. The caldera is a geological structure. So the McDermott caldera with a big, huge lithium strike has set the tone for some of the early forays into economic diversification in new areas. And in fact, it made Northern Nevada part of a national effort to identify innovation hubs. So they got theirs on energy storage or battery technology. So Southern Nevada also includes this. Advanced manufacturing, personally, I think that's something to actually look at. I think if you connect clean tech and sustainable, like they didn't really mention it on this page, but Southern Nevada does kind of lead the way on water conservation, given the shortage of water available in the Southern Nevada region and the population growth. So clean tech, they're doing more energy, clean energy and whatnot. But personally, I would include water recovery, water conservation, and so on. So environmental friendliness, that goes well with advanced manufacturing. Manufacturing is not always the most efficient. They usually tune for output, not process sustainability. Not always, but so that is somewhere where Nevada could actually shine. So I could get behind the manufacturing. The battery stuff, I don't know if that's more northern, like we may be adjacent to that in the Southern Nevada region. Sports, tech, and entertainment. I think the presumption here is that there's a certain amount of coherence between these two and the fun economy in general. I would tend to agree. Fintech, this one I don't really buy. You can do financial services, financial instruments, the technology around them. So trading platforms, processing platforms, payment processing, especially the software tools. It's a lot of software. I will disclaim my involvement over the years. I have been involved in PCI audits. So that's personal. I can't remember what PCI stands for at this point, but at this moment. But it's the storage of personally identifying information and making sure that that information is stored securely. They have a bunch of guidelines about that and how information is processed and transported to other payment processing systems and so on. And then I've also done payment transactions, so automated clearinghouse, ACH, on the wire for credit cards and so on. So when I hear that fintech is a major component of the economy of the Greater Vegas area, where what is it? What was the title of this document? Industries that thrive in Las Vegas. I don't know if I'm buying that one, but it's okay. Las Vegas's geographic location and stable infrastructure support high volume, high availability data centers. Here's a fun fact. If you go to the Switch, which is a huge data center, thanks Enron for that infrastructure, pennies on the dollar, a little criminal activity, they will tell you that Southern Nevada is basically free of fault lines and earthquakes, which makes it a nice spot to have, thousands of server racks and computers and all that stuff. And that sounds good, except that Southern Nevada has quite a few faults, and we have quite a few. Well, there's a lot of seismic activity here, so there are some of these claims that I would raise my hand and ask annoying questions. Healthcare and biotech. Healthcare is existing. Has seen a 22% growth in the biotech industry since 2018, it says. And I have seen somewhere else that it's healthcare in general is something like 25% of the economy. We're getting there maybe. So healthcare. Biotech, maybe. They're basically leaning on a new medical school that's just had its inaugural class start this year, September. And I'm sure there is hope for more. So research on the academic side and healthcare in general. That may be as a percentage of the population of Clark County is around 2.3 million people. The Clark County School District is the largest single employer in Clark County. So maybe healthcare is based on the percentage of people who receive healthcare in the area, and that is a population percentage that leads to it being a major component of our economy. Maybe, I don't know. So that's something that we'll look into. Again, this episode today is sort of an introduction to this. Like, oh, look at this! Another study is kind of reaching a similar conclusion. This is something worthy of starting a conversation about. So that's this episode. There you go. Okay, so. And by the way, if you visit the LVGA page, if you go all the way to the bottom, there's a thriving entrepreneurial ecosystem here. Maybe they should say entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem. Las Vegas is a fertile ground for startups and entrepreneurs, recently named the best city in America for pre-IPO startups. Recently means 2023 or 22. I can't remember. I've talked about this previously. Our vibrant ecosystem supports dreams and visions. I don't know about that, transforming them into Series A funded realities and successful IPOs. I don't know if that's really true. Let's see a list of the IPOs, and more importantly, let's see a list of the actual companies that have received this funding and which ones have failed. Why failures? Because failure is an indication of risk. If this is not a risk-averse area, that means startups can come here and take advantage of these opportunities. If there's no failures, that means there's not a lot of risk being taken. It means there's not a lot of startups that are serious. There are getting started documents, and there's more background information that you can continue with, and these are the sorts of things, as I said, will be included in a deeper dive in the future. There's another component of all this that we'll talk about that I think is essential before we really dive into that kind of stuff. So cohesion, what is this? The article about the report is interesting, and again, adding the report itself to my overall undertaking is something I'm considering, sometime, not this week. It's just another thing on my to-do list. For the moment, I'm going with cohesion as described in the article, linked as it relates to the pursuit of this topic in these audio programs to date. So again, I've touched on the elements that are mentioned in this article and thus that appear in the survey, or the study, I should say, from the study. So appear in the report on the study. There you go. So the article itself is worth a read. It's very brief. The report itself will certainly be more interesting. So what is cohesion? And we can find direct references or descriptions, I should say, in the article. So from the article, right up near the top, a new investigation from the Complexity Science Hub shows that across 170 years of U.S. economic history, the growth of cities follows a remarkably consistent rule. Even as urban centers expand and diversify, diversified economy? Sounds like something familiar. They tend to preserve a steady level of coherence, a measure of how closely their economic activities align with one another. That should sound very familiar. And near the bottom of the article, in the study, coherence is the glue that holds a city's economy together. It reflects how similar or connected two randomly chosen workers or firms or patents in the same city. I don't know about patents. That sounds okay. In the same, I guess we're a global hub of innovation, so there'll be plenty of patents, right? In the same city are let's back up a little bit. If it reflects how similar or connected two randomly chosen workers, and I'll leave out the hyphen, the interruption there, in the same city are in terms of their occupations, industries, or technologies. So does everything interrelate in some way? Now, I will say in Silicon Valley, for example, well, there are people who work in restaurants and there are people who work at Oracle. That's true. But people do have to eat. But there doesn't need to be complete and total coherence. And here's a little trap that people fall into. When you say we're going to be the next Silicon Valley, it's important to realize that Silicon Valley is made up of at least 5 different counties. Each of those counties has countless cities. Each of those cities has its ups and downs, its benefits, its cultural, historical presence, and its sort of established properties and features and so on. So if you're thinking, San Francisco, completely different from San Jose, completely different from Atherton, completely different from Fremont, completely different from Milpitas, right? There's a whole bunch of variety, different people, different histories, different legacy of, well, this used to be an orchard, or this used to be, all kinds of stuff that makes the Bay Area fairly unique, on top of the fact that it's, where technology comes from, where disruption and all kinds of other headaches. So I think it's improper to say, we want to be like Silicon Valley. You should pick a very specific locality. The notion of Silicon Valley is difficult to pin down. It would be a simple matter to say, well, restaurants and startups are not, or tech startups, the Oracle and In-N-Out Burger are not, they don't cohere, but it's a big place. And as we'll get to very shortly, I should say, larger does not necessarily mean complete coherence. So it is interesting to note and worth further examination that cohesion or coherence becomes more difficult. Let me just edit that because I typed cohesion. I kind of use those interchangeably every once in a while. Coherence becomes more difficult, or at least more challenging, as a city or locality grows in size, as measured by population. This makes sense if coherence is analyzed according to jobs data, jobs data is the thing that can change most quickly. The industry, the types of businesses that are forming or moving into the area or leaving the area, what sorts of occupations individuals are hired for, how those occupations are related, think 6 degrees of separation, sort of like that, and how many such occupations exist in a stable form for a suitable time interval. That is, for example, construction jobs don't count towards long-term employment, right? Those are short-term jobs. So is an industry stable? Is there job growth, like the number of jobs available? So as the population grows, will people take the same types of jobs in the same types of industries and the same types of companies? Or will there be a diversification of the types of companies and thus the type of occupations and thus the skills that are required and so on? And will those diverge in coherence? Interesting. As there are more people, there may not be more of a particular occupation, but perhaps additional industries will form and add additional types of occupations. Will those occupations continue to be related? And that's the coherence question. And then there is a constrained transformation right there in the middle of the article. The findings show that, this is a quote again, the findings show that although cities develop new activities and abandon old ones, they do so in a way that keeps their coherence constant. The measurement of coherence specifically is sort of mentioned in the article, but that's why I want to get the actual report on the study and see what they're... And by the way, there is a supplemental document with some of the math and so on, which I skimmed over, but I'd like to see the full context. So we're putting a pin in that for the future. This suggests that and this is still quoting, this suggests that such transformations are constrained. Although cities can develop new activities and drop old ones, while doing so, the set of industries they maintain seems to need to stay coherent at any given point in time. So I think probably the best way to simplify that is to say that you cannot have two industries, for example, that are parasitic of each other. Like we have one example I used to give when it came to holacracy. One of our industries is building new buildings and the other industry is tearing down new buildings, right? Those are two industries that don't cohere well, although maybe they cohere too much. They would keep themselves busy all the time, but they should be able to reinforce each other and not be parasitic. So that's one way of looking at coherence. So this should all sound very familiar. One of the reasons I produce the Cafe Genius Impresario's audio program is to leave a stack of receipts as observations are made and notions are formed, mostly by me, but hopefully that'll change over time. Maybe tuned a bit over time. Thus, there are episodes discussing these considerations I have pointed out. So some that appear in the article, and hopefully they will be more detailed in the report that I will read, and then we'll talk about that more in the future. Stated and restated a few times across all of these episodes, more or less. While I'm fairly certain you are already flipping through the previous 136 episodes of this audio program, let me remind you of a couple of things we have covered. Maybe I will save you some time. After all, we will revisit this stuff in that deeper dive I mentioned, taking studies we have already covered. This is this new study as well as it relates to Greater Vegas in the coherence, or through the coherence lens, like a laser coherent light, and a few other elements which we want to use to capture a more granular view of life on the ground in our entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem, and maybe some more stuff. So the three general areas we can begin with based on this article about the study. I know it's annoying. I should, there will be an episode about the study, I promise. Oh yes, you know there will be. As related to Greater Vegas so far. First, if Greater Vegas, really Southern Nevada, Clark County, this area. So I usually call it Greater Vegas because I think Las Vegas, and there was talk of renaming Clark County to Las Vegas County or Vegas County, so that when you're going to Vegas, you are actually going to Vegas. And by the way, I live in the city of Las Vegas proper, so not everybody does. this area is intent on pursuing economic diversification efforts, which commenced in earnest around 2018, probably for longer than that, and which have become a more pronounced focus in this post-pandemic era. Coherence should be maintained. This is in that study, which we'll talk more about in the future, which means migration from existing components of the current economy to new additions, possibly deprecating some of the old components that are not doing so well, should account for that transition with time to enable the larger ecosystem and the people in it to respond. If you shock the economy, it may not respond so well. A few years ago, this would have been a glib learn to code action. Now, as then, it's not really so simple. I would point to the California next to Fremont Street, downtown in the actual city of Las Vegas. They recently removed all of the human-powered gaming from their casino floor. It is now all automated, all slots and computer gaming. Hopefully that's not the future. That removes a certain differentiator. I mean, if all you need is some slot machines and some adult-style entertainment, bars, restaurants, and so on, well, you can imagine. If we take any two random people working in the greater Vegas area, how far apart are they? Not in space, but like I said, in the larger ecosystem, in the 6 degrees of separation sense. I would submit the fun economy ecosystem is not naturally intersecting with the healthcare ecosystem. I mean, it obviously does because people in the fun economy do get healthcare, but they're pretty isolated from each other when you really think about it. For example, and as you may have heard many times, really, many times, am I saying it that often? There are some exclusionary attitudes around the nature of entrepreneurialism in some quarters of the greater Vegas area where tech startups are all that matter. That's what they'll tell you. They'll say that in so many words. If you ask many people if Greater Vegas is a place of insular silos, you will get little argument. That's simply a fact. In fact, I believe it was mentioned in the first study by Mo Collins a couple of years ago. We can do better. We can do better. So, I mean, coherence kind of begins with not having insular communities of different groups of people, different geographies, groups of people like maybe people in the hospitality industry, people in the tech industry. I have literally heard the words, I am not in tech, so I'm not really a part of the startup scene or whatever it is, right? So you've heard me say it before, startups don't have to be tech. Entrepreneurialism is a challenge whether you're doing tech or a food truck. And I've done both. Sort of. I've never actually owned a food truck, but I've told that story already. Are there transformational constraints preventing our economic diversification efforts from going awry? Well, let us look at 2 laps of Formula One racing in Las Vegas with a third coming up in November. Oh, it's only a month away. The events themselves, the pre-event construction, the post-event reconstruction, impact on local businesses and tourism, these are elements we have covered here. They've certainly made the news, but let us zoom out a bit, as we have also done in previous efforts. How much confidence should we, in the Greater Vegas ecosystem, maintain for the powers that be at the state, county, and local government levels and the related non-governmental agencies to constrain transition efforts? Did they do a good job of looking out for all those who would be impacted negatively by the Formula One race, or did they have dollar signs in their eyes? And we know the answer to that already. It is fair to say for myself, I have already answered that question. It was not a lot of confidence. I'm just looking at the way things go. We can always improve. We can always make it better. It is too early, though. This episode is not about what is wrong. We have already taken a look at several issues in isolation, including that insular silo situation. That was a while ago. The lack of interest in a broad variety of entrepreneurial pursuits due largely, from what I can tell, on the investor-driven efforts on the part of, say, Startup NV. And we don't have a lot of other options. Generator, maybe. They're looking at conservation efforts. Okay, good. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's an overemphasis, I should say, on unicorns and investments in tech, and that's where we're looking, and we're not really interested in entrepreneurialism, really. Just we want to be like Silicon Valley. But again, which I think in the future I will start asking, which city? Because they're all different. By the way, I did spend from 1993 to 2013 in Silicon Valley. I was mostly just sitting around and watching. No, I worked at a lot of different companies. I've talked about that as well. Broad variety of it. Startup in Vienna, focus on larger company entrance into the greater Vegas economy with incentives and whatnot. And in A&D, with incentives and whatnot from the GOED, the Governor's Office of Economic Development, with encouragement from the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance. So they've said it in so many words. They want big companies to move here and maybe even bring your employees. Let's gentrify the area more quickly. To drop only a couple of pieces onto the board, I'm just mentioning Startup NV, Generator, GOED, LVGEA, the LVCVA, of course. There are some others. A part of a problem, which was illustrated clearly with various Formula One race issues, which had a pronounced negative impact on some local businesses, is the lack of awareness of the various facets of our, well, maybe a not so coherent ecosystem. I wrote not so coherent ecosystem. And by the way, we mostly focus on the entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem on this program, but it is part of the larger, more diverse Greater Vegas economic ecosystem in general. So that's a much bigger picture with a lot more moving parts and a lot more need for awareness of coherence or lack of, and how they interrelate. All these, the different ecosystems and those within, and again, it kind of comes down to coherence, how they cohere, or form a whole, if you prefer. Now, it has been said many times that the Greater Vegas area, maybe all of Clark County, is not really a single place, and that kind of goes back to that Silicon Valley fact that I mentioned. It's not as simple as saying, oh yeah, Vegas is going to be the next Silicon Valley. Which parts of Vegas and which city in Silicon Valley? So I think that's often an oversimplification and some hand waving. I think there's a lot more that goes into exactly what is meant by that, and I don't think people have actually done that. So a part of the problem. Greater Vegas economic ecosystem is something that has to be better understood, and more people have to be aware of its intricacies. I have asserted this before. There is an imbalance between biases on fun economy considerations, food and bar business considerations, local housing and cost of living considerations, and so on and so on and so on. So there's all these complexities, all these moving parts. The complexity, again, is these are things that may not be completely understood. Certainly there are complications, and this is where more data should always be taken. So at this point, I have mentioned this before, I have grave concerns regarding how the disparate components of not only the entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem dysfunction, but also the Greater Vegas economic ecosystem at large as well. Do its various silos even communicate? I don't know. If we do live in a smart city, and we could be living in a smarter smart city, being the global innovation hub we claim to be, perhaps, that's where the Innovate for Vegas Foundation is supposed to come in. We should be using the tools at our disposal to make Greater Vegas a coherent, diverse economy. That involves a few moving pieces, including real data capture on the ground on a regular basis, which is why it is too early to throw in the towel on the presumption that we lack real coherence here. Thus, we need to take those measurements and do that analysis. And that's something that we could be doing right now. Personally, I don't think a global hub of innovation should do a study on its overall health, trends, so on every couple of years, literally. And I often compare this to the RTC here, the Regional Transportation Commission. Very proudly states that they do a survey of riders of their buses, public transportation. They do their 10-year survey. And I always say, you should be surveying people every 10 minutes. Every time someone rides a bus or is waiting for a bus that doesn't show up here. Yeah. And by the way, make that data transparent. The RTC does have an open data portal on ArcGIS. They should be making more use of it. We will. Systems thinking, then. That is what this episode is about. City as a system. Now, obviously, a city is a system. Fun fact, I went through the Leadership Sunnyvale program when I lived in the Bay Area in Sunnyvale, California, part of Silicon Valley. There is a Leadership Las Vegas program. They charge a ton of money. And I don't know if they're on the same page. They may suffer from big city itis. Sunnyvale at the time had a population of about 120,000 people. Still had a certain small town thing going on. I could go into the city offices and speak to the city manager, interview him for my podcast. Yes, I had a podcast, Radio Sunnyvale. So yeah, cities are already systems, but city as a system when it comes to how we think about the growth and so on. That's the subject of that article. It's the subject of this whole entire podcast, this audio program. Many of the things we've talked about and will continue to talk about and think about and so on. So merely calling it a system is one thing, but actually treating it as one and trying to choose ways that we can understand it better so that we understand the impact of changes and so on. That's part of what the Genius Roundtable is about and why I would like to have another round with some different approaches to some things to try to learn more, understand more, do a deeper dive from the ground, actual entrepreneurs as part of the conversation. So stop me if you've heard this one about my VW Bug and its new 1835 engine that I learned a lot trying to build and install and so on. I was having a conversation with the mechanic shop owner. Why did I say the mechanic shop? The shop owner, Chuck Ballou, of course, who sold me the car. He also happened to be a neighbor down the street from where we were living, where my parents' home is. He described a typical mistake made by people who were modifying their VWs, where they took the fine engineering of the stock VW engine, a pinnacle of German engineering. It was not, but still the people's car. It had to be reliable and cheap to maintain. So the stock VW engine, for example, modifying and so on, changed a couple of things like carburation or valve lifter geometry or exhaust or cooling. Basically, the system was designed as a system and built to function that way. Making changes without that thinking that went into it would mean less reliability, maybe less performance than expected or by comparison to the original design. Even with a larger displacement, with a larger 1835 versus, I think stock was originally, the 1600 was really like 1580 something, maybe 1567. No, I can't remember. So adding 300 or so cubic centimeters to the overall engine displacement makes a difference. The question is how efficient are you getting what you should be getting out of that? And is it going to last? I mean, Volkswagen engines were known to last forever. Forever. Almost lost my voice. I'm so proud. You may not be getting what you could be getting. Shorter lifetime of the whole vehicle, perhaps, or just the engine, who knows? In this context, the stock engine is made up of several design decisions and build processes that are coherent. Changing them shouldn't be taken seriously. I said should not, because my cursor was sitting over the D in should. So not should not. Changing them should be taken seriously. So if you make changes to a system that is working, or even changes to a system that is not, it's important to understand where it is before you make the changes so you can see if you made it worse. And this is not a comment on people here in the city staff, in the offices of various agencies that are part of the city government or adjacent. So I will say that when I lived in Sunnyvale, I took part in the city planning effort. They reached out to people who live there to participate in one of the elements of the city 10-year plan. I think it was 10-year plan. The LUT, the land use and transportation element of the city plan. So they had people give feedback on things and so on. And I was speaking to the person that was running this community outreach survey. I said, so if you ask us these questions today, and then 5 years from now, halfway through the 10-year plan, do you revisit where you expect it to be versus where you are, kind of an error signal, and you can make adjustments? She looked at me like I was speaking some other language or maybe crazy. Apparently they don't do that. You may recall my involvement with the business of mobile vending. I referred to that earlier, also known as food trucks, as an example. Here in the Greater Vegas area, we had the Nevada Mobile Vendors Association just before the pandemic, not after. and the existence of protectionist regulations and legislation which explicitly prefers brick and mortar restaurants to food trucks. I mean, I've heard that stated plainly. Quick typo. I'm going to drink of water for a second. All right, we're back. I paused a little bit there. So I've heard that stated plainly that that the health department and industry here prefers brick and mortar to food trucks. The classic argument is they spend a lot of money on rent. Why should they let a food truck that doesn't have to pay rent get away with, compete, steal their customers, etc.? It's not that easy. I've heard that stated by the Clark County Health Department in particular, somebody who managed the entire mobile vending inspection process and licensing, or permitting, I should say. So I've heard that stated plainly, and not to mention the fact that the National Restaurant Association really hates food trucks, and that's national. That's not just here in Vegas. They don't like any competition. However, anyone who has taken a look at the value of portable variety and social activation to make geographical areas interesting or more interesting knows that you're not necessarily stealing customers. Somebody who goes to a food truck was not necessarily planning to go to a particular restaurant. Oh, you've stolen my customer. Maybe they said, oh, a food truck that I've never tried before, or a food truck that is my favorite will be there. I'm going to go there. Do you consider yourself a stolen customer? No, I wasn't going to go out, but I saw that my favorite food truck is out here. Without data, there are presumptions that can be made that favor one type of business over another, but are they correct? Well, it would be nice if this were the one case where this is true, where data is absent, so we make gut decisions. So clearly they're stealing my customers. That's sort of similar to the old days when people who were downloading music from Napster were very clearly costing the record companies I totally forget the acronym, but you're stealing music every time you download an audio file. You're taking money out of our pockets without the consideration that, well, maybe if this wasn't available to download, I just wouldn't download it. So I would not be hearing your music at all. I wouldn't pay you. I'm not going to pay you anyway. I don't want to pay for your music because I don't want to buy a whole album. I want to buy one song, or I want to hear one song. Kind of the genius of Steve Jobs and iTunes. He was smart, also a jerk. But anyway, so complete understanding of the actual business terrain, not making simplifying assumptions based on motivated reasoning, right? It sounds better if you're stealing our customers rather than offering portable variety and social activation, which ultimately makes a better business environment, which probably will draw more customers to your business if you let it. We can argue that a system based on beliefs or on how it actually functions or does not function today, so that we know how changes impact that function are needed. We should be thinking about that more. Systems. The thing about systems, they can sometimes work well with some feedback loops. Take that data, but take also more data. Often, take that data often, right? Every day, every week, whatever the correct sampling rate is, not every few years. That's not really appropriate. And look at it over time. Car analogy, we need to check the gauges, check the tire pressure. I guess today we need to check battery health and diminish charge capacity. Though modern cars really just dump that through the old ODB2 port, so you can always get that data. Or they even more likely now, just send it up to some cloud service violating your privacy. Let's share your location with everybody all the time. The same is true of just about any system that can be measured if it is observable. That's a good word to keep handy, observable. Then observation should be made, and made often. Observable and controllable. That's a real thing. It's an engineering thing. That's my academic and professional background, so why not? Should we take data on year-scaled time or make daily capture a possibility? And you probably know what I think. So that is my treatise on City as a system to get the ball rolling in that direction more. When I have some time, I'm going to purchase the report for the $20. Or maybe I'll see if somebody can get it for me, because we are an institution at this point. No, we'll see. $20 is a small investment. Some of the reports are free. Some are $20. Some things will require some actual development of a platform to perform that rolling introspection I mentioned. And I'd like to tie that together with a downtown project retrospective. So if we can have an introspection effort ongoing and a retrospection with a similar set of, say, questions, similar elements to survey, we can overlay them and see where we can learn more, where we can fix some things, where things are working well, where things worked well in the downtown project based on opinion, and make sure that we don't make similar mistakes or that we aren't avoiding the learnings of that time frame. What will often happen is you get people saying, well, let's compare Vegas to Silicon Valley and to Austin and to Research Triangle and to Provo, Utah, whatever. They'll fill in a bunch of, they'll choose places with similar industries or similar industrial transitions, economic diversity plans and timelines. If you look at the city of Austin, for example, you will find a great example where coherence was not accounted for. Culture crushing, gentrification. And I've already done an entire episode about how that seems like a real possibility in Vegas if people aren't paying attention. And again, I'll remind you that Silicon Valley is more than one city. It's a very complicated terrain. There's a lot of history, a lot of culture. And again, episode 85, my favorite of this very audio program, Vegas as the Next Vegas, goes into some detail about the evolution of Silicon Valley. Remember that the study I'm referring to today is 170 years of U.S. history and city growth and diversification and so on. Silicon Valley did not start in 2008. Silicon Valley did not start with a whole bunch of people ready to go, as some people here in Vegas often portray it as. Silicon Valley started in the gold rush era. Leland Stanford University, investment in the culture of innovation that was already cultivating itself sort of organically, an interest in telegraphs, communications, the vacuum tube industry, the presence of military funding, being a coastal city. So there was a military presence, Lockheed, Moffett Field, the company that's totally escaping me right now that was on Evelyn that would make Polaris, was it Polaris or Trident? Launch tubes for submarines. They were doing, metalworking and so on for forever before that. So the Bay Area was already connected to government and government spending. When Frank Terman returned from his pursuit of radar for military applications during World War II in 1944, he became the Dean of Engineering at Stanford. Thanks, Leland Stanford, and the money he made from selling picks and shovels to gold miners at the school named for his son, who unfortunately died very young. Yeah, in 1944, Dr. Terman put Hewlett and Packard on the path to forming their company in that little shed, and he convinced Shockley to move from Bell Labs, where he had just received the Nobel Prize in Physics for the transistor. He said, hey, why don't you move closer to your mom in Menlo Park? And he started Shockley Semiconductors, which is when Silicon Valley kind of became Silicon Valley. And there's a whole bunch of things that happened. You don't simply sprinkle capital over a city as a result of some meetings at some dude's house with a bunch of other rich people who say, what can we extract from the city? So there's a lot more going on to making the transition into an economically diverse area. As I often say, the use of the term ecosystem is fitting because you cannot convert a desert into a rainforest by sprinkling money on top of it. In fact, just imagine the challenges of converting a desert into a desert where people can actually live comfortably. Thank you, Carnot cycle and heat pumps for air conditioning. So that's, I'll end it there or else we'll go another hour. So that's where we're going to leave it for today. Thank you so much. And remember, this is the beginning of a little tributary fitting into the overall big picture, analyzing our entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem in the greater Vegas area. What does the future hold, especially for those of us who are a part of it? Thanks for listening.